Okay, so hello again, my dear grade 10 students. So at this point, we are going to talk about the female reproduction cycle. So last time, just to recall, we talked about the parts and functions of the male and female reproductive system. And then we try to look at the different diseases of the reproductive system, particularly the STDs. And then we try to enumerate ways on how to maintain a healthy reproductive system. So for this session, we are going to talk about the female reproductive cycle or female reproduction cycle. And to start with, I want to ask the girls in particular because they are the one having or experiencing monthly period. Okay, so what are the common problems that you encounter and what are the means and ways on how you can remedy these problems? Okay, so most of you experience dysmenorrhea. So this is so painful. And some of you cannot just simply manage when they have dysmenorrhea. For some, they just simply lie the whole day. Others take a pain reliever to ease the pain. And for some, they make use of a hot compress, no, for the pain to subside. So there are uh, other practices applied in order to manage dysmenorrhea. And of course, there are other problems concerning menstrual cycle. I made mention last time of abnormal menstrual cycle, the amenorrhea, oligomenorrhea, absence of the menstrual cycle. And of course, if you encounter problems like this, it's important that you seek medical attention so you will not encounter problems in the latter part of your life. Now, girls, so you have to seek medical attention at once in order to treat this kind of disorder. Okay, so why am I asking of the common problems in your monthly period? Because for this session, we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle. Okay, so here we have to summarize the events that takes place during the female reproduction cycle and describe the feedback mechanism involved in regulating processes in the female reproductive system. And of course, make an output that address common issues related to menstrual cycle. Okay, so for female reproduction cycle, this is actually divided into two. The female reproduction cycle has something to do with what is happening in the ovary and what is happening in the uterus. So take note from what you learn from the parts of the female reproductive system. So you see how important ovary and uterus are, because for ovary, it's where the egg cell is produced, and the uterus is the one that caters the need of the fetus or the growing young. Okay. So for female reproduction cycles, the first one is the ovarian cycle. So what do you think is happening in the ovarian cycle? Okay, so when say ovarian cycle, this is the changes in the ovary as it prepares the egg for maturation. Okay, so we know that the egg cell is in the ovary. So what preparations are made before the ovary release its matured egg? We call it as ovum. Menstrual cycle, on the other hand, of course, is the changes that is taking place in the uterus as it grooms the uterus for possible implantation and pregnancy. Okay, so this is the complete picture of how reproduction cycle takes place. So I want you to look at the diagram and see what did you observe in this reproduction cycle. Okay, so from here you see that this reproduction cycle happened in a span of 28 days. So normally, reproduction cycle takes place at 28 days. So for female, it vary from female to female. For some, they have short reproduction cycle like 21 days, and for some, they have longer reproduction cycle like 35. We cannot just simply tell that this is not normal. But what we are talking here is the 28-day reproduction cycle. Okay, so you see here in the ovarian cycle the changes in the ovary as it prepares the egg. So you see here the word follicle, and you have the corpus luteum. So later you will see that ovarian cycle are divided into two phases, the follicular phase and the luteal phase, because it has something to do with the follicle and the corpus luteum. Okay, and take a look at the important hormones responsible for the reproduction cycle. So these hormones are actually um, secreted in the ovary, of course, and this is directed by the pituitary gland from the hypothalamus, because we learned that there is a coordinated function of the nervous, endocrine, and reproductive system. So I want you to look at the hormones, the luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, estrogen, and progesterone. And I want you to look at how they are used in the reproduction cycle. Okay, so if you happen to check the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone, they are usually constant before and after ovulation. And you'll see that in the ovulation day, and that falls on the 14th in the 28-day cycle, you see that the two hormones are at its peak. Okay, so in the ovulation day, there is an increase in the production of the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, here for estrogen and progesterone, so you see also of the role of estrogen in the ovulation. Okay, so for ovulation to happen, it's actually supported by the hormone estrogen. And after the ovulation, it's the role of the progesterone. Okay, so later you'll see in the feedback mechanism of why this is the picture of the significance of the luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, the estrogen and progesterone in the reproduction cycle. And you see here the uterine cycle. Now, so what is actually happening in the uterus? Okay. So you see here the breaking of the uterine lining. You see that it's growing. It becomes thick. And then again, it detaches, it breaks, and then bleeding happens. Okay. So this picture indeed gives us a complete idea of what is taking place in the ovary and in the uterus, and the role of the hormones in making reproduction cycle possible. Okay, so for The ovarian cycle, take note that the ovary is the one responsible for the egg cell. So when we say ovarian cycle, this is the changes in the ovary as it prepares for the mature egg. And the monthly release of an ovum from the ovary, we call it as ovulation. And take note that ovulation happens on the 14th day of a 28-day reproduction cycle. Okay, so this happens in 28 days and it's divided into two parts: the follicular phase and the luteal phase. Okay, so let's check what is happening in the follicular phase. Okay, by the way, what you know of follicle? Okay, so follicle is a cluster of cell that encloses or surrounds the immature egg, and this one provides the nutrient for the egg cell. Okay, so in the follicular phase, let's see what is happening. So first, the pituitary gland releases two important hormone: follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And the two, of course, are responsible for producing the estrogen. Take note that in the picture a while ago, that estrogen is increasing in preparation for ovulation. So the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone produce that estrogen, and that makes ovulation occurs. So that makes ovulation possible. So estrogen prepares for ovulation, for the ovum to be released from the maturing follicle. Okay, and then second part of the cycle is the luteal. Okay, you see here cells also. This is called the corpus luteum. Okay, so what do you know of corpus luteum? Okay, so corpus luteum is a yellowish follicular cell that acts as endocrine. How? The luteinizing hormone makes the corpus luteum produces estrogen and progesterone. Okay, and this progesterone prepare for fertilization. Okay, so the corpus luteum is the one that produces the progesterone, and that progesterone will be used for fertilization. So take note, fertilization is the meeting of the egg and sperm that happens in the fallopian tube. Okay, so again, luteinizing hormone rupture the follicle, forming corpus luteum. Okay, this is that part. Okay, it's ruptured. And then it caused the corpus luteum to secrete estrogen and progesterone. And progesterone naman will prepare for fertilization. Okay, so this is what is happening in the ovary. As the ovary prepares for the release of a mature egg. Okay? So let's see what is happening in the uterus. Okay? So menstrual cycle is the monthly shedding of the endometrium lining. And this is, of course, influences by hormones. This is the changes that makes pregnancy possible. So it's a series of change that prepare the body for implantation of the fertilized egg. And take note, the first menstrual cycle is termed as menarche. Menstruation usually stop as the person ages. At the age of 45 to 55, we call it as menopausal stage. That time, the female will not ovulate. Okay, so that means she will not bear young. And the bleeding usually lasts around 2 to 7 days. And again, it varies from female to female. Okay? So For the changes in the uterus, again, menstruation happen 14 days after the ovulation. Okay, so if implantation is not successful, 14 days after ovulation, then menstruation takes place. And you see here the changes that occurs in the uterine lining in the uterus in a 28-day cycle. So here in the bleeding days, menstruation, uterine lining is shed. So the uterine lining breaks, and then it sheds, and it comes out here in the vagina. So after that, with the help of estrogen, okay, so the uterine lining starts to grow again. That is in preparation for ovulation. So here, a mature egg is released from the ovary. That is preferably on the 14th day. Okay? So here, uterus lining continues to thicken. So for possible implantation and pregnancy, as the progesterone prepares the uterus, it makes the uterus to thicken. So for her successful implantation and pregnancy, then it prepares the uterus. But of course, if implantation is not successful, uterine lining again detaches from the uterus, and then bleeding takes place, and the cycle goes on and on. Okay, so this is the typical uh, diagram showing menstrual cycle. So normally a person bleeds 2 to 7 days. That's the normal. So menstruation days. Uterus lining breaks down and menstruation occur. Okay? After that, in the 8 to 11 days, the lining of the wound thickens in preparation for the release of the mature egg cell. So here, the ovulation days, normally on the 14th. So 12 to 17 days ovulation occurs. So that is on days 12 to 17. So after the egg is released, we'll now be moving on to the luteal phase. So if fertilization has not taken place, the corpus luteum fade away. Here, the uterine lining detaches, leading to menstruation. And after this 28th day, on the first day again, bleeding happens. Okay, so if you are to make use of this as a mean or way in checking for, if you are to use this for family planning method, this can possibly be used, no, if you were able to track the cycle correctly. You may use this, no? So in the bleeding days, of course, fertilization is not possible. Here on 8 to 11, these are safe days because no fertilization is going to happen. Why? Because there's no egg cell yet. Here in these days, these are considered fertile days or not safe. Why? Because sperm has its lifespan and egg cell also has its lifespan. So if intercourse happen on the 12 days after the menstruation, the sperm lives 2 to 3 days. So therefore, it will still meet the egg on the 14th. So after the release of ovum, since the egg cell has a span of 3 to 4 days, it will only live up to 17 days. So if there will be intercourse here, these are the possible days that fertilization may happen. But after on the 17th, on the 18th, egg die, so there will be no fertilization that will occur. So these are still considered safe days. So these are the bleeding days, safe days, unsafe days, not safe fertilization is possible, and these are the safe days. That's why for couple who are into calendar method and trying to make use of this one, so long as the menstrual cycle is 28 days, then this can possibly be used. But of course, this will not hold true, or this will not be applicable for other female who has a different days of cycle. Okay. So this is the summary, no, of the phases of the menstrual cycle. So we made mention of the follicular phase, that is day 1 up to day 14. So before ovulation, day 13, then we have ovulation on the 14th day. Luteal phase is after the egg is released, and then bleeding days, menstruation. So here in the follicular, estrogen level decrease, and in ovulation, the mature egg is released, and then in luteal phase begin after the egg is released, and then estrogen and progesterone level drop, and then bleeding lasts for 3 to 7 days. Okay, so other than this, we have also event highlights of a 28-day menstrual cycle. So similar to what I explained a while ago, follicular phase. So during menstruation, the endometrium breaks down 1 to 5 days. Ovulation on the 6th to 13th days, follicle matures and reveal the endometrium lining. The matured egg is released on the 14th day, and then corpus luteum, formation of corpus luteum, the endometrium thickens and develop. That is on the 15 to 28 days. Okay, so you have to remember this. So for feedback mechanism in the reproductive system, so again, let's try to look at the role of the hormones. How these hormones play an important role in making reproduction cycle possible. How are they controlled and how are they managed with the help of our endocrine and nervous system. So in feedback mechanism, from the diagram, you'll see here negative feedback, okay, here, and then you see here the positive feedback. Okay, so you see here the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and then the ovary where we have this estrogen and progesterone, okay? So in the negative feedback, rising level of hormones feedback to the hypothalamus and decrease the production, okay? Here, this is the negative feedback. No? Rising level of hormones feedback to the hypothalamus to decrease. That's why it's termed as negative feedback. On the other hand, you see here a positive feedback. Okay? So in a positive feedback, it's the other way around. So rising level of hormones feedback to the hypothalamus to increase the hormone production. And you will notice here that the levels of hormones will depend on the cycle, because here the negative almost happen in most of the cycle, but the increasing number of the hormones happens on the ovulation day. And that is what we found in the diagram for reproduction cycle a while ago. Okay, so here, this is what I'm telling, no? The level of hormones in the ovulation in the ovulation day, what are the hormones that at its peak, so it's about positive feedback, and the hormones that remain constant all throughout the cycle, it's actually the negative feedback. So during most of the menstrual cycle, estrogen and progesterone provide negative feedback. Estrogen and progesterone provide negative feedback to the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. So this keep their level constant. Okay. And then on 12 to 14 days, that's ovulation. The positive feedback, estrogen, look at this, provides a positive feedback on the hypothalamus because that is important for ovulation or in preparation for ovulation. So this is the positive feedback. So it feedbacks the hypothalamus to increase its production because of the ovulation. Okay? And then during the first half of the cycle, that's the first half of the cycle, negative feedback keeps the level of follicle stimulating luteinizing hormone, estrogen and progesterone constant or stable. First half of the cycle. In the ovulation, so positive feedback causes a burst of luteinizing. So here, luteinizing, positive feedback, okay? A burst of follicle stimulating, luteinizing, and estrogen. So that's on the 12 to 14 days, that's ovulation. On the second half of the cycle, you see that progesterone rises because of the corpus luteum. It's the one that increases the production of progesterone. And negative feedback maintains the amount of the rest of the hormones, FSH, LH, and estrogen. So only progesterone because of the corpus luteum. Okay? So that ends our discussion about the reproduction cycle and the feedback mechanism in reproduction cycle. So I hope you learned something from this discussion. See you next time. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.